umming and ahhing about making this video. I've been thinking about it for probably at least a couple of years. And I don't feel like there's been enough awareness of what's happened or what did happen. So I've decided to put myself out there and speak on the matter and see whether we can analyse some of the information that is publicly available to us. Let's give it a go. This video is going to be more about theories, not so much about the history and timeline of Bung's disappearance. It's going to be unpacking information and looking at it more in an analytical aspect. Coming from Melbourne, I could talk a little bit about Boronia. Boronia is predominantly a working class suburb. With the increase in house prices in Melbourne, obviously it's attracting a different demographic. But back in 2011, you would say it's more working class. The type of houses there are basically single-story brick houses with a carport or perhaps a garage. Because it's near the Dandenong Ranges, there's usually a lot of trees and scrub around that area. But basically, the houses around Boronia are very, very sort of plain and modest. It's especially rough around the train station with drug addicts, a slightly higher crime rate, but no higher than places like Dandenong. Boronia is far better than a place like Dandenong or perhaps even Doveton. But this is all my own personal opinion. Obviously, people that have grown up in the area may have a different opinion, but by and large, I think most people would agree that Boronia is more working class. Boronia is situated in the southeast suburbs of Melbourne. It is located in the foothills of the Dandenong Ranges. The Dandenong Ranges is basically what you would consider a forest. It's heavily wooded with a huge amount of scrub. The size of the Dandenongs covers kilometres. Like I said, it's heavily wooded, so it's very, very difficult. It'd be very, very difficult to navigate and explore. There's quite a few walking tracks in the Dandenong Ranges, and it's a beautiful place. There are many residents that live in the suburbs that are in the Dandenongs, and it is quite hilly with an elevation of over 600 metres to the top. I suggest everybody to check out a video by Samantha Melanie, where she goes through the whole timeline, all of the details, the family dynamics leading up to the disappearance of Bung. It's a really, really great video to watch. So with the timeline, it suggests that she went missing at around 8 a.m. and the alarm bells were rang around 4 p.m. So that's about 8 hours of time in which is unaccounted for. So to put that in perspective, if you hopped in the car from around where they lived, you could basically get yourself about 750 kilometres or 466 miles away. So that's a huge distance. That gives you an indication of, in that time period, you know, you could really make some tracks. You could go from Melbourne and basically be arriving in Adelaide. You could go from Melbourne and basically get to the ACT. So that's, a huge span of time. Anything could have happened. Something did happen. Over the years, I've thought about the situation, and when I look at Google Maps, I can see around that area. I can look at the streets of Boronia, and the thing that bugs me the most is that something happened. No one knows what's happened. Somebody knows something. Either they're going to take it to the grave or they're already in the grave. Somebody knows what happened. So when I look at the streets around the area, it gives me the chills to think about it. The next part of what I'm going to talk about is highly sensitive and could be a little bit graphic, so viewer discretion is advised. I find this part a little bit difficult to talk about, so I'm going to talk quite quickly about it all. But basically, if a person's deceased, It's likely that they're either buried, their body has been disposed of, as in maybe burnt, or the body is in storage somewhere. So let's unpack that in the fact that it's been now up to 10 years. Things that you would have a think about is, if she is buried somewhere, that's very difficult because it could be anywhere. The time has gone on for so long that you would speculate that maybe in the first 8 hours should be buried somewhere. To then transport a body later on, you've got to be cut from a different type of cloth. If you got to do it, then I suppose, I'm not quite sure on that particular point. But if it's in storage, then what you're looking for is somebody that's renting some storage for now up to 10 years. So any storage companies that have had good paying tenants, that could be a possible avenue, or even a factory, if they've been renting it now for over 10 years or 10 years thereabouts. You just never know. There's been cases where they have found people, stored away, you have to excuse my language, but stored away in 44 gallon drums or IBCs and that kind of thing. She could also be, at a rural property somewhere. Again, this is all speculation, but if there's a mate that has a rural property and they've got some 44 gallon drums there, there's a possibility, but again, that becomes very, very difficult. But if you're looking around the Boronia area, the first port of call is, and it's low-hanging fruit, look at storage containers, look at industrial property, somewhere where is away from prying eyes. In a factory, anything can happen. Maybe she never even left her street, Elsie Street. Maybe she's still there. Could she be still at the house? Of course, the police have investigated thoroughly, but there's always a possibility that, has she been put between walls? That's happened before. Again, I'm speculating and I'm not accusing anybody of anything, but I want to bring a little bit more awareness of possible theories as to where she's gone. She can't have gone too far, or could she have? The next one leads me to, next point I want to make is, she was buried somewhere. Okay, well, where is she buried? Well, look right next door. You've got the Dandenong Ranges there. You've got kilometres of heavy wooded areas with bush scrub. She could be anywhere. When you've got an issue like that, you're going to need manpower, and I think the only way that this case will ever get solved is if somebody discovers something by accident, or a large group of people come together and actively search for her. There is GPS trackers, I forget the actual name for it, but basically it's like a metal detector, but for bones. If there was significant investment, I'm not sure whether you would even achieve success, but I mean, if you got 100,000 people to comb through the Dandenong Ranges with a special detector that detects bones, maybe you might come up with something. But to achieve that level of financing and coordination would be a huge undertaking. Then there's a theory of a gang or a person abducted her. Mr. Cruel, or whatever his name is. There's people that are on the sex registry of offenders list, possibly around the area back then, that maybe had something to do with it. But the problem that I have with that is that Bung's 13 years old. Would she have screamed if it was somebody trying to abduct her, well, it's likely yes. So then that leaves, it's somebody that she knew or has met before. Could it be an older boyfriend? Possibly. Could be a family friend? Possibly. And then that opens up the question, well, where did she go? Where did she get taken? One thing I do want to say is that hats off to the detectives that took on this case, because I can imagine that'd be very, very difficult for them to have something like this unresolved. I'm sure that plenty of these guys still go to bed thinking about this case. Maybe they wake up thinking about it as well. But there's been no real closure except for a false report of somebody that's fairly elderly with some tats. Let's talk about the family. The mother is now living overseas. Apparently they're still together, husband and wife. Fred still lives at the family home in Elsie Street. There's been cases where, I'm trying to choose my words carefully here. There's been cases where somebody will live at a house where something bad has happened, and only when that person actually passes away, somebody new moves in and then discovers something horrific at the house. Let's talk about what a fitter and turner does. So in the pecking order of blue collar jobs, a fitter and turner and a machinist would be at the top of the pecking order, as well as a toolmaker. These guys are extremely intelligent because they can interpret blueprints and analyze drawings. And what they actually do with these drawings is they create parts, and those parts keep the machines running. So they assemble parts, they manufacture and fit parts, they repair parts, and I'm generally talking about the metal industry and the plastics industry. So if you think of the metal industry, you might operate large presses to stamp parts. Obviously within the press, you've got certain components and you've got the press itself. So a fitter and turner is quite specialised. So the type of people that are fitters and turners have quite high aptitude because they keep the operation going, the manufacturing operation going. So having high aptitude and being mechanically minded, you would easily be able to fix things, anything mechanical. A lot of these guys are very interested in old cars, and they can make parts that other people can't, and they like to repair things. So there's certainly an interest in machinery when it comes to being a fitter and turner. The problem with eyewitness testimonies is that they can be very unreliable because you're dealing with somebody's memory. So the fact that her neighbour saw her walk past on the way to school, if you look at that at face value, then you would decide, well, yes, she actually did try to walk to school. But if you discount that and you only look at the facts that she went missing from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m, within that time frame, there's a start and then there's a finish. And the finish is when the school was alerted, and then from following on from that, then you've got the police involved. So, a neighbour seeing her walk past, it may very well have happened. Maybe the neighbour got mixed up that it was the day before or the day after. So with that being said, it could be said that there's a theory that she actually never left the house, or maybe she did leave the house but she went a different way. 450 houses were door knocked. Those houses were on the way to the school. There was a main road that she had to cross. There was no eyewitnesses saying that she crossed the road. A 13-year-old girl of Asian descent wearing school uniform sticks out. Surely there was somebody that saw her along that main road. Hundreds of cars would have passed. there is a possibility that she never went that particular route. Maybe she went some different way. Maybe she was meeting up with a friend. Here's another theory. Bung was living a separate life, or a different life. She had quite a few different social media accounts, some of which stated that she was a different age. Would I say that's common or uncommon? I would say that probably that sits in the middle. Maybe she had some friends on her social media platform that she didn't want, and then she wanted to create a new social media profile. Maybe she did have somebody she wanted to talk to privately. I wouldn't say it's that strange, but perhaps she was a totally different person. But when you're 13, that means you're in year 7. Your brain's developed enough that your personality is really showing through. But when you're 13, while you might have a few secrets here and there, it could be pretty unlikely that you've got a skeleton in the closet that you really need to escape from. Did she have bipolar? Well, from all the media reports that I've read about her personality being fun and bubbly, perhaps not. But if she had bipolar and then wanted to escape, she's 13 years old. I mean, 13-year-olds don't have the financial resources or the wherewithal about the layout of Australia and where to go to hide yourself, especially now coming up to 10 years. So you're going to speculate that there's somebody else involved that's either assisting her or harming her. Now, if somebody's assisting her to escape, after 10 years, you would think there'd be a sighting. Okay, let's talk about another theory. Maybe she didn't like being female and she wanted to transition to being male, which happens. But there's been no indication in any reports that she had an inkling that she actually felt that she wanted to transition to being a male. And when you're 13, you'd be at the stage where you would express emotion to your parents about wanting to transition to being male. There'd be discussions had, and maybe you would run away from home, maybe. But would you disappear for 10 years, have the financial resources to complete the transition? It's very, very unlikely that happened. So if it's not really running away from home because you would be found usually after a short time, then we've got to say that maybe there was harm her way. Other things you can look at, somebody's personal name, super fund if they've got one, as in their self-managed super fund, companies that they're listed as directors, and you will look at those 3 entities and see where property is held and assets are held. So for example, a superannuation company may hold on to shares in a trust, and that trust owns a rural property that somebody has access to that they could use for their own personal gain or whatever they would like to use it for. You would then look at friends and family, and you would look across personal, super fund, and companies, and then you'll do exactly the same thing, and you keep running through every single person and looking for either tenancy in a storage facility. You look for rural property or any property of that matter. What you're searching for is you're looking for areas in which she could be hidden, she could have gone missing, and you just keep running through it. This would take some time, but you want to uncover everything. The person that holds the asset may not necessarily know that something devious has happened, but it's worthwhile as low-hanging fruit to go through those necessary steps, which I'm sure has already been gone through. If we think that harm has gone her way, or harm has happened to her, what you're now looking for is you're looking for a body, or any remains of her. Because Australia is such a vast place, it's going to be very, very difficult to just search the whole of Australia. So you want to start with, obviously, the parents. Again, just speculation. We're just talking about this to solve the case, not accusing anybody of anything. But you start with who's front and centre, and then you start going out and out and out, thinking about friends and family. And then once you've exhausted that, then it becomes a difficult task. So, which is obviously the detectives spent over two or 3 years really trying to run down every single lead, receiving over 900 phone calls about seeing this and seeing that. The theory about the old HQ station wagon, it was 2011, and apparently there was a sighting with somebody that looked like Bung in the back seat. Even in 2011, a 1971 HQ station wagon would stick out like a sore thumb. Whoever's done this does not want to stick out at all. It's a 1971 car. It's considered a classic. EB, Falcon station wagons, there'd be people that would notice that car. It's not inconspicuous. But I'm pretty sure that Ford Falcon was later discovered as a hoax. The person lied about that particular incident. But the HQ station wagon was one that has been confirmed. Bung leaves her mobile phone at home. It's 2011. She would have one of those slide phones with the QWERTY keypad. She's 13 years old. She's walking to school. But even in 2011, to leave your mobile phone at home to be walking to school only 5 minutes away or 10 minutes away, you'd think that she'd be bored. Maybe she would reach into her pocket or her bag for a mobile phone. But yet, apparently it was fairly common for her to leave it at home. 13 years old, year 7, leaves a mobile phone at home, but she only lives 10 minutes away. Would her parents have been that upset if she just quickly walked back home to grab the mobile phone? Because I know what I was like when I was 13. My parents actually would always ask me, "Oh, you got your mobile phone and I need to call you. We'll work out the time in which, I'll pick you up from school." Let's talk about Bung's physical stature. So we know that she was 154 centimetres, which is 5 foot. She was 13 years old, and a person of that size and age would weigh approximately 40 to 45 kilos. If somebody was trying to abduct her, to get 40 or 45 kilos into the car, kicking and screaming, maybe she was held at knife point, there'd be screaming involved. It's more likely that somebody would have seen something if that occurred. Okay. Somebody picks her up that she knows, so she goes in the car. To me, that sounds more plausible than just her getting abducted and then somebody throwing her into the car. Still, 40 to 45 kilos of flailing arms and resisting would still cause a bit of drama around the area, especially around that particular time, around 8. There'd still be mum and dads floating around in houses. They would hear something. I know in my street, if I even hear a car that I'm not familiar with or that has a loud exhaust, I would peek out and have a bit of a squeeze. If we're talking about 450 houses here, then you can draw a conclusion that if there's loud noise, it's likely that people would be more interested in seeing what's happening outside. But if it's somebody that's getting into a car, a nondescript car, and the person entering the car is not under any duress or stress, then that's more plausible. Okay, just a warning on the next part of this video because it's quite sensitive. So, just to talk about if she is in storage, you know, what type of device would it be? Well, she was 40 to 45 kilos, which would roughly equate to, 45,000 cubic centimeters, which then equates to 45 litres. I mean, you look at a 44-gallon drum, that's 200 litres. So she could easily be stored in something of that nature. An IBC, which is even larger, 1,000 litres. So if you think that harm has come her way, again, it pains me to say this, burnt bone fragments still would be floating around, buried, which is a high possibility, or in storage somewhere. Could be any number of those things. 10 years later on, where the hell is she? Let's touch on taking things to the grave. I think if harm did go Bung's way, there's either somebody out there that's still alive that knows about it, or they've passed away and taken her to the grave. So if the person's still alive that knows about this and knows exactly what happened, I want to touch on a few points about how this person may be able to still operate with this knowledge. Okay, so somebody that has done something terrible, if they can change the neurological pathways in their brain to modify the story in their mind and narrate it in a different way, they may be able to live with themselves. Okay? If the person puts it out of their mind and almost makes it as if it never happened, which is possible but extremely, extremely difficult, there is a possibility that they can live with themselves with what's happened. A person in this particular situation may avoid drinking, drugs, and anesthetic. The reason why you would avoid drinking, drugs, and anesthetic is because you don't want to have yourself in a situation where you let slip, or your inhibitions are lowered, or you're not in control. So a person that is in control of themselves 100% of the time has a far greater success rate of taking something to the grave. Maybe they do use alcohol or drugs or whatever, but they might use it in their own time when they're by themselves to self-medicate. But if you've done something incredibly wrong, it may be advisable to skip out on all those things, because you never know what you might say. After you've had 10 beers, you're spinning a few yarns with your mates, and you let slip that, oh yeah, you used to be a bad guy back in the day, but you've turned a new leaf. You're going to get people inquisitive, so you're best off avoiding those situations altogether. let's talk about abduction and gangs and human trafficking. I don't know a lot about the subject, but what I do know is with human trafficking, there's multiple people involved. So I'm not saying that it can't happen. Of course, it can happen. It could be a dark web thing, or she was abducted to fill an order for a rich guy that wanted her for whatever reason, and then she was shipped off overseas. You just got to think about the logistics of all of that and the witnesses. There's no witnesses. The lead detective said that it was like she vanished out of thin air, like an alien abducted her. You would think after 10 years, the criminal underworld, for all the wrong that is done in the world, there is certainly a line that's drawn with certain activities where it would upset a lot of criminals. Some people would have their own honor code. So I feel like something of this nature would rub people the wrong way. Let's say this person's already in jail, and they realise, well, their life would be in danger if they talked about it. Maybe they just won't say anything. But if word got out that this particular person had done something that was linked to something else, they wouldn't have a good time. And I feel like the underworld would let people know, because there are some criminals that, if they had a different upbringing, they may have well ended up being a police officer, because maybe they wanted action, but the people that they hung out with, they went down a different path versus somebody that's gone down the path of becoming a police officer, or in the force. So there's that perspective, and that's something worth thinking about. Okay, let's talk about the fact that her neighbour did see her. She did cross the main road on the way to school. She came to the back entrance of her high school. Let's say that she decided not to go to school and continue down Harcourt Road until she reached Forest Road and then sneak through. Let's say that she wanted to go for a bit of a walk. There's a possibility that there was an element of misadventure and she got stuck somewhere. It is incredibly plausible that occurred. There's a chance that she fell. She fell down into a hole somewhere, or fell down the side of a hill. She rolled her ankle, she broke her leg, she knocked herself unconscious, she got trapped somehow. It's very, very possible that something like that did happen, because she is in an area where there's lots of nature, especially being near that national park. If she didn't get abducted, she could have gone for a long walk. There could have been some boy trouble that no one knew about except herself. Maybe she was confused about her feelings. Maybe she had something on her mind. Maybe she left her mobile phone deliberately and she was having dark thoughts. That is a true possibility, because she would be walking to school every day. She would get to know the area. Maybe she would look at it off in the distance, and then go for a walk down there, and then progressively she learnt the area. So that particular day she decided, she's going to go for a walk. Could it have been suicide? I certainly hope not, but it's a possibility. Can't rule that out because you haven't found her. You've got eyewitness testimony that puts her walking down the street. But then after that, it goes cold. But if I was a betting man, I might say she's not too far away from where she lives, and she just hasn't been found yet because being in the foothills of the Dandenong Ranges, she could be anywhere within that area. Again, I just want to say that I'm not making any accusations. This video is purely to raise awareness on the disappearance of Bung, and if you have any information, please contact the relevant authorities. Hopefully we can get some closure as to what actually happened to her and why she just vanished out of thin air. Thanks for watching, guys.